I hope everybody had a good time to network and share your thoughts and ideas. I hope you also got something out of this morning's keynote speakers. I think they were very engaging, very informative. One admin note, if you are going to have a sidebar discussion outside of the room here, please move all the way to the atrium. It gets a little, we can still hear you if you're just outside in the, right outside the doors here, so please take it away from the room here. So our next speaker is Miss Merle Maigre. She is Executive Vice President for Government Relations at CybExer Technologies, an Estonian firm specializing on providing governments, international organizations, and companies with cyber training environments for large-scale cyber exercises. Prior to this position, she was the director of the NATO Cooperative Cyber Defense Center of Excellence, which we heard about this morning. She also served as security policy advisor to the President of Estonia and the NATO Secretary General. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to welcome Ms. Maigre. There you go.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. First of all, congratulations to the Army Cyber Institute for the 3rd US CyCon. It's great to be back. Last year's conference feels like yesterday. Earlier this year, in Tallinn, the NATO CCD COE celebrated its 10th anniversary and also the 10th CyCon in Estonia. Time really flies. The fact how time flies reminds me actually of a joke how a teenager finds a floppy disk in the drawer and says, wow, someone's 3D printed a save icon. But on a more serious note, in 2017, there were 8.4 billion things attached to the internet. By 2020, there are likely to be somewhere between 20 to 75 billion, depending on whose estimates you believe. As computers become smaller and cheaper, we start having them in more and more places. Mobile devices, the Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, machine learning, biometrics, self-driving vehicles, and the emergence of quantum computing, all these create new opportunities. However, technology is never perfect. Any technological system, service, or innovation is ultimately vulnerable. A Symantec report estimated that 978 million people in 20 countries last year were affected by cybercrime at a cost of $172 billion US. This shows that technologies and threats in cyberspace are in constant change. Cyber attacks make no difference between geographical borders, between civilian and military, public or private domains. Incidents last year, like WannaCry or NotPetya, demonstrated how the paralyzing and damaging effect of a cyber attack can impact individuals and organizations across the globe in a matter of few seconds. The worldwide damage caused by both campaigns extended to healthcare institutions, vital infrastructure, and a string of well-known companies all over the world. So what can we do about this? Me coming from Estonia, I thought I'd share with you a few thoughts of what we think about cybersecurity in Estonia. So I'll show you 2 slides and make 4 points. So I think there are 2 pictures that capture best the Estonian thinking of cybersecurity. The first picture is about Tallinn Old Town. It is beautiful, but it is so beautiful because mostly we were too poor to take down the old medieval buildings and replace them with the modern ones. Just over 2 decades ago, Estonia was behind the Iron Curtain. Today, the country is referred to as e-Estonia, setting the world standard for empowering people online. Likewise, with this innovation, there is some serendipity here, because about 18 years ago, when we were planning to make more government services available online because our online tax filing system had worked so well. As it happened, we realized that we really were too poor and couldn't afford to have one centralized system with a big server bank. It was just too expensive. And in order to solve this problem, we developed a data exchange layer for information services, something we call today the X-Road, using an enterprise service bus. It's all interconnected and everything has to be authenticated. So we ended up with security by design. Estonia's R&D ecosystem, investment in human capital, and zero income tax on retained or reinvested profits makes it stand out, especially on digital capabilities. Our Estonian digital ecosystem enables the country to save over 800 years of working time annually. Think about it. Estonians invented Skype and TransferWise. Ericsson has its R&D based in Tallinn. The country has third largest number of startups per capita in Europe, and it's been in top 5 of the International Telecommunication Union Global Cybersecurity Index for the last few years. And also the World Bank's Doing Business in 2017 ranked it among top 25 hotspots for global entrepreneurs. Our curiosity to explore and the necessity to protect has brought us to discover and apply various new cybersecurity concepts in Estonia. Being a pioneer in digital and cybersecurity issues, of course, comes with the responsibility to share. So we are proud that the NATO Cooperative Cyber Defense Center of Excellence is based in Tallinn, and its international contribution is widely recognized. But here too, the largest and most comprehensive live-fire cyber defense exercise in the world, the Locked Shields, is run by the Cyber Center in Tallinn on a very modest budget. So no bells and whistles, just fiber and strategy. Summing up my first point, often beautiful innovation is happening because of rather mundane reasons. The second picture captures the Estonian Song Festival. It is one of the largest amateur choral events in the whole world. Organized every 5 years in July, the joint choir comprises of some 30,000 people performing to an audience of some 80,000 Estonians. And much of the time, everybody just sings together. It shows how we do crazy things in Estonia. We do things that others haven't done before, and we do it in a comprehensive way. For Estonia, cybersecurity means the protection of our digital society and way of life as a whole. We do need a comprehensive approach. We cannot afford to have an alternative to a digital society. Accordingly, we do not have an alternative to investing in IT security as well. For Estonia, it is no secret that security is often regarded as a trade-off against convenience. Similarly, computer security tends to be regarded as a compliance exercise that both slows down development and costs a lot. In Estonia, I believe we have overcome this bias. We recognize that investments into digital innovation must go hand in hand with serious commitments to cyber security. Now, there should also be a third picture about the rule of law and education, but I ran out of ideas. The third experience of Estonia shows that internet access is not enough to benefit from digital development, as most of the work has to be done at the level of governance, legislation, and education. 2 years ago, the World Bank addressed the very same issue in its development report. It concluded that ICT only brings benefits or dividends on investments in the countries that have established a strong state based on the rule of law, are implementing good governance, and have carried out extensive reforms that support digital solutions. I cannot agree more. The so-called analog complements to digital investments are really crucial. To name the most relevant ones, strengthening regulations that ensure competition among business, adapting skills to the demands of the new economy, and fostering accountable institutions. Connectivity is vital, but not enough to realize the full development benefits. To enable companies to leverage the internet, to compete and innovate, to empower people to take full advantage of digital opportunities, and to make governments respond to citizens' needs. Ultimately, what this says is that cybersecurity is more a human problem than a technical problem. What's important is the laws and economics, as well as psychology and sociology. And what's critical is the politics and governance. Government involvement, whether in the form of legislation, liabilities, or direct funding, is not a universal remedy, of course, to cybersecurity, but neither is its absence. At its best, government enables us to establish the baseline of acceptable behavior, to overcome collective action problems, and to finance efforts that emphasize near-term payoffs, that don't emphasize near-term payoffs and go beyond that. So summing up the third point, cybersecurity is primarily a problem of incentives and policy. Once we've got the incentives right, the technologies come along and make it happen. And government plays a major role in all of these policy incentives. My fourth point is about training and education of the top level. Education is vital for internet security. We need to raise awareness on security and teach decision makers to make smart security choices without necessarily turning them into security engineers. Our societies are confronted with modern, largely unpredictable threats. And even if we've invested into the technical capabilities, it is often the decision-making frameworks that fails us. At the beginning of this year, NATO CCD COE became responsible for identifying cyber defense operations training requirements and training solutions for all NATO bodies of the alliance, across the alliance. I was still with CCD COE back then, and I can tell you, there really is a global shortage of cybersecurity skills in the workplace, especially at the top level. By now, many political leaders like to say that cybersecurity is important, but there is less really comprehension about why and how. So raising the awareness of decision makers about internet security is essential. How to do it? I believe that human is the most important link. And I also believe that advanced persistent threat can be countered by a well-tailored advanced persistent training. Cybersecurity is not a technical problem. We must not ignore the importance of effective decision-making procedures in cyberspace. This is where things tend to get stuck and often even blow up. We need to train strategic decision makers and provide them with an experience of having to solve a major cyber crisis in their country or in their company. A good cyber war game motivates participants to discuss and understand the often conflicting issues associated with decision-making in a cyber emergency. Key analytical questions, I believe, that leaders need to ask, they can fall into 4 categories: timeline, transparency, authority, and cooperation. Timeline is about how much time you need to take a decision. How far can plans be made ahead in cybersecurity? Transparency is about whether a decision is public or secret, and what should be shared with the industry. This deals with the public exposure of decision-making. Authority is about who in your organization has the authority to execute the decision. What are the crucial decisions to be made during a cyber crisis, and who is to make them? And in what circumstances should authority be delegated up or delegated down? And finally, is the existing legal framework appropriate for handling cyber emergency situations? And fourthly and finally, cooperation. That includes questions like, what is the horizontal cooperation network you need to employ to successfully implement the decisions? Are current interagency cooperation mechanisms sufficient? Do they work? How much international cooperation within NATO, EU, or UN is needed, and what is the role and responsibility of the private sector in organizing response? Believe me, it is better to work out an answer to these questions within a country or a company before the crisis hits. Luckily, the leaders are not left alone in all of this. So I'll finish up with a personal story. As the former national security advisor to the President of Estonia, I can assure you that nothing has shaken and shaped the security thinking in the Baltic Sea region within the last 5 years more than Russia's occupation of Crimea in 2014 and in the war in Ukraine that followed. I still vividly remember the conclusion the Estonian president made at the emergency meeting of the National Defense Council at the beginning of it all in March 2014. The Estonian government and the defense establishment has to keep a close watch of the events in Ukraine and be prepared if crisis hits us closer to home. A few months later, there was a government-level crisis management tabletop exercise in Estonia that simulated meetings of the government, the National Defense Council, and the parliament. I got to play the role of president, and it was a very memorable day. So why am I telling you all this? It is because effective protection means preparation. Preparation requires knowledge. Knowledge needs practice, and practice can best be conducted in a lifelike environment. In order to prevail, we need to build a community of decision makers who really understand the importance of cyber defense. It's a great club to belong to because it is the only club. Thank you. Yeah, there's time left, so happy to take questions.
Any questions from the audience at large?
Edward Silvius from the Army Cyber Institute. I couldn't resist getting back behind the mic. I just want to thank you for sharing some of the thoughts about e-Estonia. I've always wondered, do you believe that some of the techniques in digitization that you've used over there can scale to the world at large, or do you think that the size of your country kind of limits it sufficiently for it to be so successful?
Well, as I said, I think it is the setup of the e-Estonia and its principles, like using the enterprise service bus, the security by design, and the authentication, but it's more importantly the so-called analogs that need to accompany every digital revolution. The good governance, the rule of law, education, and investing into the skills of workforce. So if we think of the future of cybersecurity, really the tools for building the future include regulation, innovation, social responsibility, worker and consumer rights, and education. This is essential. The e-embassy concept in Estonia is based on the principle that the country should continue existing even on digital spheres, even if in the case of the worst case scenario of the occupation. So that the Estonian main online registries are copied, and copies of that are kept outside of Estonia, so that if someone would to physically take hold of the country, the online system would continue. Thank you.
Appreciate having you, Tom. It's a great voice. Thank you.